Happy 4th of July. And let me just say, it is good to be back. Yeah. Many of you know, a few weeks ago, I had heart surgery and had a mitral valve issue. It was repaired and it is fixed. I am better. I am well on my way to recovery. And I want to thank you, my wife, Kristen, I want to thank you for your prayers and thoughts over these past few weeks. It's really meant a lot. So hopefully I have more blood flowing now. I'll be a better preacher. You won't fall asleep as much. I'll be a better person. Hopefully that's the goal. But thank you so much for your prayers and concern. I want to read you a passage today, one verse, as we celebrate our nation today on this 4th of July weekend and the freedoms that we have. It's John 15:13. And Jesus is about to go to the cross. He's about to sacrifice his life for his disciples and for the world. And he's talking to them about the importance of love, that it's all about love. But then in verse 13, Christ says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." Why in this church do we remember Memorial Day? Why do we celebrate the 4th of July? Because on those dates in our services, we are thankful and grateful for the men and women who have gone before us and who currently serve us and are willing to lay down their life that we might enjoy the freedoms in our country here. So today, we have a very special guest who's going to come and share his story with us. He was a part of the Special Forces in the Rangers. He served 5 deployments in Afghanistan and in Iraq. He was also involved on the mission that captured Saddam Hussein. He's been a part of our church for about 10 years. He and his wife, Lacey, they have 2 boys, Elliot and Oliver. And it's my honor and privilege to present to you right now, Sergeant Stephen Cunningham. Stephen, come on up. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Have a seat. Stephen, tell us, first of all, how does someone become a Ranger? How do you get into Special Forces? You can't just walk in and sign up. I'm sure it doesn't work like that.
Somewhat. You got to be a little bit rebellious as a teenager, I think. You can technically sign up. It's a voluntary unit. All special operations units, they call voluntary. If you don't meet the standard, you're not going to make it. Through enlistment, they have nomenclatures for all their contracts. It's an option 40 contract. Essentially, what the recruiter told me was, I can sign you up, you can go to infantry, basic training infantry school, airborne school, and then you'll have the opportunity to go through Ranger assessment and selection. And if you make it, then that's when the hard stuff begins. So
how were you? What did you just show up and say? Listen, man, I want to be a Ranger. I want to get after it. What happened? What was the process?
That's pretty much what happened. It was a poster. It was a recruiting poster, and it was a fairly spur of the moment decision to enlist in the military. I'd spoken with a Marine recruiter, and didn't really light a fire with me. I went to see the Army recruiter next door, and the recruiter didn't have a background in special operations, but he had a very cool poster behind his desk, and caught my eye. I flat out asked him, well, who are those guys? What do they do? And he gave me a brief description. They were in an inflatable boat in the swamp, all camoed up with their guns, looking very cool. And I said, I want to do that. And he kind of laughed at me. I think they hear that a lot, but I was serious or naive. Probably the latter. But signed me up, and the rest is history.
How old were you?
I was 18. I signed up halfway through my senior year of high school. And
Okay.
so
Do you have
shipped out
any
in the
military
summer.
in your family at all, or?
So both my grandfathers flew B-24s in World War II, but then there was a generation gap there. My parents, my family, my dad, pro-military. He wanted to serve. He had played college football, and his knees were shot. But
Yeah.
it wasn't pushed on myself or my brother. It was encouraged, and like I said, it was really a spur of the moment kind of decision.
Yeah. How did your parents were like, hey, that's great, you're signing up for the military? Were they?
Well, my dad was proud, excited. My mom was probably more worried about how I would handle authority versus bad guys.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So tell us, for those of us who are not in the military, we see all these movies and shows. They talk a lot about the training. Tell us about the training to become a ranger. What did that entail?
it's the specific training takes place really when you get to your unit and you're training with your team. The selection and assessment programs are purely meant to wash people out. So how much suffering you can take, sleep deprivation, food deprivation, and a lot of physical exertion. And if you're still standing at the end, then they start to train you up. So in the beginning, it's basically don't quit.
Yeah, yeah. When you mean physical, what are some examples of what they would do to you?
Sure. And so in RIP, the Ranger Indoctrination Program, the infamous physical test is an untimed, unknown distance ruck march. You have a very heavy backpack on. You have to go until they tell you to stop, and you don't know at that point if you've made the time criteria. It just ended up being like 12 miles in about 2 hours with a 45-pound ruck, but that's probably one of the most infamous physical tasks you have to endure in selection.
So when you're getting selected for special ops, how many start off and how many finish? Like, give an example.
Sure. So in my RIP class, it was well into the mid 300s, and I think 64 of us graduated.
Wow.
And I tell everybody, it's not really. It is a physical thing, but it's a mental thing. If you don't quit, they're not going to kick you out. Mm-hmm. There are physical standards you have to meet, but the mental aspect, the mental grind, is what gets most people.
Yeah. Now you signed up when, right? What year was that?
That was 2001, December 2001. So I was 4 weeks into basic training during 9/11. We were carrying around rubber M16s, and all of a sudden they gave us real guns and ammo and told us to guard these streets. And it's funny to look back now, but like we thought we were going to do something.
Wow.
In that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to us. You had 5 deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. What is a deployment, first of all, and then what do you do on a deployment?
Sure. So a deployment is simply that. We deploy to combat zones. My first one was to Afghanistan in the fall of 2002. The Ranger Regiment has 3 battalions, and we were on 90-day rotational cycles between the battalions. And the mission is to kill and capture bad guys. And it's 90 days, probably 80 missions in 90 days every night. Your specific target, going to look for a specific bad guy that did a specific bad thing, and hopefully bring him to justice.
Yeah. And you guys, back then, some of the young folks who are not here, tell them about the deck of cards and what that looked like.
Sure. So that was Iraq, and the invasion was early 2003, obviously, and things really heated up later in the year through the fall. But I guess my deployment from October of 2003 to December, every mission was based on the deck of cards, and they had a wanted list from the Ace of Spades, which was Saddam, all the way down, priority level. So any intelligence that they had on anybody in that deck of cards, the most actionable intelligence they had for that night, that's who we were going after.
So every card had a bad guy on it. Boom,
Right,
boom, boom.
right,
You're
right.
supposed to attack.
Yeah. It's my understanding that the President Bush came up with that.
Oh, really?
With that philosophy. I don't know for sure, but
Yeah.
the deck of cards was a real thing. And as you can imagine, the ultimate goal was Saddam. So for 90
Right.
days, everybody we caught acted like they knew where he was. So they could either save themselves or get paid. A lot of disinformation was
Right.
prevalent then, but just so happened that on our very last mission of that rotation, somebody decided that something was valid enough to immediately mobilize from Baghdad to Tikrit.
Yeah. I want to save that, so I want to come
Sure.
back to your capturing of Saddam. Tell me about, like, what time of day would one of the missions look like? What would you do? Were you interacting with SEAL teams and other folks? How did that work out?
Yep, sure. So more often than not, I think on 4 of the 5 deployments, we were on what was called a reverse schedule. So we would sleep all day and we'd be up all night. And then a typical mission every night, you could set your clock to a routine there, from gym time to when you were going to eat, how much sleep you were going to get, how many video games you could play. We would do an operations order with a specific target, usually 3 hours out from target time, depending on where we were. If it was a high-value target, there would be other special operations units involved. A lot of times the SEALs, another Army unit that's Tier 1, most people recognize as Delta. They did a lot of work in Iraq at that point in time, and so just depending on the value of the target was who all was involved in the mission, and combatants on the ground like to work with the ratio in our favor. More good guys than bad guys makes it better.
Yeah. How did you deal with fear? I assume that was just, when you're going into these life and death situations. I mean, 80 missions in 90 days. How did they prepare you all to deal with those emotions of fear and psychology?
Ignorance, arrogance.
Ignorance, and arrogance.
Probably
Okay.
mostly arrogance. By design or default, I don't know. The average age in the Ranger Regiment is probably right around 20, and when you have a group of 40, 20-year-olds that are all Type A, every teenager feels they're invincible. Then you get cool weapons and a lot of high-speed training. Then you really think you're invincible, and you can lift a lot of weight. It's hard for me to answer. I don't know. I think I grew up a Christian. It's not something that I thought about on every mission. I didn't pray before every mission or anything like that. But I think mostly it's just the trust in your teammates and the guys you serve with, and the amount of training that we did, that we just were confident in what we were doing.
So you didn't really, you weren't that afraid. You just,
I could probably count out of 300 plus missions on one hand the times that I was genuinely concerned for my safety. And more often than not, those were times going into the mission that you get a little lackadaisical, maybe think it's a lower level mission, and then something happens and you've got to adjust. But and I'm not saying that to sound brave or tough.
I know that.
It's just like I said, I think the culture builds into it a lot.
Yeah. Tell us about Saddam Hussein. Tell us about how you guys captured him and what happened that night, that day.
Sure. So I didn't personally capture him, and I actually didn't even see him being pulled out of Little Hold. I was there. Like I said, every mission was geared towards finding him, and after that 90 days, 80 plus missions, and all this intelligence leading to him and always being dry holes. You hit a certain point in the deployment tour, you're just ready to go home. And so when they tell you you're on your last mission, they tell you, well, we got one more, and they think they know where he is. And at that point, I'm in enlisted ranks, so there's a lot of skepticism when the officers tell us something like that. But turns out they were right. We went up to Tikrit. They pulled him out of the hole. At that time, I was a team leader, so I had access to all the network communication. I'd hear everything going on. And to be honest, it was, at that time, it was just another bad guy.
It was just routine.
Right.
But how did you know? Was there a signal that you knew it was Saddam, or what happened?
I think the call sign was bingo. I think if I remember correctly.
And you heard that?
You heard it over the net, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess my claim to fame, which I don't really consider it to that, but he was transported back to Baghdad, and like I said, that was the end of our rotation. We had been staying in the green zone, and we moved back to the airport, Baghdad International, where everything was kind of staged out at that time. He was being kept in an interrogation facility there. And as we were waiting for a 2nd Range Battalion to come in and relieve us, we had guard duty on Saddam. So I had 2 personal guard duty shifts guarding him.
Just you and him?
Just me and him, just like this.
And did you talk to him, or I mean?
I probably muttered something to him at one point. I was not authorized to do so.
Right.
He would speak all the time, and
what would he say to you?
That he was the president of a country and that he was entitled to certain treatment and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's incredible, isn't it? That's wild. That is wild.
Yeah.
Tell me, just having served like you have, and from the family you come from, tell me about what this country, what America means to you.
Sure. Yeah. Just being able to see those parts of the world, just feeling blessed to have friends that think the way I think, and a community that has the same values, and the ability for anybody to do anything that they want. It's just, I don't think people take it for granted. I just don't think that they realize that what it's like outside of these borders. And, everybody faces challenges, but, you see a place where kids aren't allowed to go to school, and women aren't allowed to read, things like that. It's just kind of baffling. And so just grateful, I think, to be where I am now, to have done what I did, and just happy to be an American.
Yeah. Tell me about your own faith and relationship with God, and how that has affected your life and view of life.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in a Methodist church, and I've always considered myself a Christian. Like I said, in combat, it's I can't honestly say it's something that I leaned on, my faith. I would probably credit my wife mostly with really pulling that out of me. But just, yeah, we had talked earlier, I miss what I did, but I physically couldn't do it now, and mentally wouldn't want to. And I'm just grateful and happy to be where I am, to be a member of a church like this, to have a circle of friends that I have, and to try to fight a battle for Jesus without a rifle. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Bringing up my boys in that light, and so that's kind of what I'm most grateful for.
Yeah. Now, are you and Lacey, are you involved in a Bible study class?
We are.
Okay.
We do the 8:30 Rubicon at Woodway.
Okay. And how important is that for those who attend, as far as you guys building community at
Plugging
Second.
in, sure, yeah, immensely. We've been members of the church probably 10 years, and with young kids and finding the times and classes and the schedules that link up was difficult, but having the class in the community and people to encourage you to actually study the Word
Yes.
and dive in has been immensely important.
Yeah, I think when people come to Second, one of the things they'll say immediately is, "Wow, it's so big," right? And then I
Right.
think once you find a Bible study class like you found and you and your wife found, it kind of, to me, the church gets really small.
Right.
Right.
Right, absolutely.
So
Yeah. Similar to the bubble of where you live in town, and it's the same way with the church. And we're grateful to have our class and community, and try to see your dad every day or every week at 9:30.
Yes.
So
that's fantastic. Well, man, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your service to our country. We appreciate your willingness to share your story here today, Stephen, and we're just honored to have you here on this 4th of July weekend. We really are. Let's thank Sergeant Stephen Cunningham. Thank you, sir.
thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man. Great job.
Thank you very much. Okay. Appreciate it.
It's always amazing me to meet folks like Stephen who've served in our military. They're so humble. You know, they're just really humble about their service for our nation, and I really appreciate his sharing his story with us here today. I want you to bow your heads for a few moments. Every time we gather here on Sunday, we want to give people an opportunity to be a part of Second and to have the opportunity to join if God is leading you. And I want to pray right now for those who are in the process of doing that. Father, I thank you for your presence here today. I thank you for the opportunity that we have here today to worship you. The things that Stephen was just talking about, things that we just take for granted here in our nation. We thank you for the privilege of worship, for the privilege of education, and to have a place where we can come and gather and to express our gratitude to you and our love to you. God, we thank you that you have a plan for every person in this room. God, that you know everyone in here intimately. And God, it's my prayer if there's someone here who does not have a relationship with you, they do not know you on a personal level, they have not experienced that new life that you can give, God, that today would be the day on this 4th of July weekend that they would stand and come down front and make you the Lord of their life and experience the love and grace that you have. God, I pray also, Lord, for those who already know you, who are Christians, they're following you, and they simply need a place where they can belong. They need a place, like we talked about here today, where they can build community, where their kids can grow, where they can connect and make a difference here in this city and in this church. So God, I pray for Christians here who need to stand and come down front today and be a part of this, your church. This is our prayer. We ask, God, collectively that you would lead those who need to stand and come down front today. This is our prayer in Christ's name.